This is an interesting question because if you read normal history books, for some reason they say America won the space race, when in actuality it was the USSR or Russia. The first artificial satellite, Sputnik. The first animal in space, Laika the dog. First photos of the far side of the moon, Luna 3. First man in space, Yuri Gagarin. The first woman in space, Valentina, Russian last name. The first spacewalk, Alexei. The first spacecraft to land on the moon, Luna 9. All of that was done by the USSR or Russia. Then, after all that the Russians did, Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. Don't get me wrong, putting a person on another planet is a huge achievement. But as to why people believe that America won the space race, political mumbo-jumbo and bollocks. If you want to know more, then put in the comments YouTube and I'll make a YouTube video. So, let's talk about it. Why hello there fellow peeps of the internet. Now let's talk about my space race TikTok. Now in this video from the very start I state that the US did not win the space race and it was indeed the Russians who won and they should have been officially crowned the winners. You see, the space race began in 1955. The terms of the race were this: which country could be the dominant nation in space? Put as much stuff up there. That was the original goal set by the US and agreed by both nations. But then, just 2 years later, in 1957, the Russians put Sputnik into space, the first man-made artificial satellite or probe in space. Now, this microwave-sized satellite was also moving at 18,000 miles an hour up there in space, so it also had to broadcast a radio signal to help with tracking. This same signal could be picked up by all manner of radio receivers here on Earth. Even the most amateur radio listener could tune in to Sputnik's frequency and listen to its history-making ping. And this is what it sounded like. It's cute, isn't it? Now, Sputnik remained in space for 3 months and completed a grand total of 1,440 complete rotations or orbits around the Earth, before in 1958 burning up on re-entry. Now, in that same year of 1957, they also launched Laika into space, the first terrestrial animal in space. A doggo. Now, Laika the dog wasn't a trained cosmonaut. Oh no. Laika was just a stray dog plucked off the streets of Moscow, strapped into a spacecraft, Sputnik 2, and launched into space, where he stayed for a whole 4 days. But unfortunately, the Russian government couldn't guarantee a safe return to Earth for poor Laika, and the official government report says that he ran out of oxygen and died in space. Which is very sad, but this was kind of a blessing in disguise, for when Sputnik 2 finally landed back on Earth, they discovered that they hadn't put enough heat shielding on the capsule. So Laika's options were suffocate in the vacuum of space, or be boiled alive coming back to Earth. I choose the vacuum of space. Then in 1958, the US launched Explorer 1, the USA's first satellite in space, where it stayed for 4 whole months. That was until the battery aboard Explorer 1 died and the US lost all control of it. So it just kind of stayed up there for a whole 12 more years until finally re-entering Earth's atmosphere and burning up in the 1970s. Now, with each of these achievements, the USSR, the Soviet Union, the Russians, whatever you want to call them, were continuously proving that they were better than the US at dominating space, which was what the Russians still believed was the point of the space race. For you see, during all this time, all of these achievements that the Russians were doing, back in the US, they kept changing the goalposts, or changing the rules or the terms, or the point of the race itself. But Russia couldn't care less. They just continued with their tremendous lead of the original terms of the race, with even more firsts. For example, Luna 3 here, the first unmanned vehicle to take pictures of the far side of the moon in 1959. But then, on the 25th of May 1961, President John F. Kennedy announced the ambitious new goal or finishing point of the space race: to land a human being, an American man, on the surface of the moon and return him safely.
We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept.
And Russia, after hearing this news, they couldn't care less. For in that same year of 1961, they put the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin. And then just 2 years later, the first woman in space, Valentina Tereshnikova. Then in 1965, the Russian spacecraft Voskhod 2? Guys, get some simpler names for your bloody spaceships. Anyway, a Russian spacecraft with 2 cosmonauts. A cosmonaut, by the way, is the Russian version of an astronaut. These 2 cosmonauts were Alexei Leonov and Pavel Bell. Anyway, on the 3rd of June 1965, Alexei decided, you know what, I fancy a stroll in space. And he was the first man to do a spacewalk, which lasted a whole 21 minutes. Awesome. Then in 1966, Russia lands the first spacecraft on the surface of the moon, but it was unmanned. And then we come to the momentous event, the 20th of July 1969. Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin aboard Apollo 11 land on the fucking moon. Also, to answer all those questions I got in my comments of my TikTok, I know the moon isn't a planet. It is an astronomical, you saw dyslexia just there. It is an astronomical object or a natural satellite. And then on that same day, hi there, Editing Stewart here. It didn't take a day for Apollo 11 to get from Earth to the moon. It took 76 hours. Now that I've corrected myself, continue with the video. 240,000 miles away from Earth, Neil Armstrong decides to go for a walk and becomes the first human being to walk on the moon and say those awesome, awe-inspiring words.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But enough of that, let's get back to the main subject, the space race. After this momentous achievement, America just kind of crowned themselves the winner of the space race, even though they had changed the rules and augmented and manipulated the goalposts of the space race itself. According to the original clauses of the space race at the beginning of this video, the US stated the domination of space, or the first nation to dominate space, or the first nation to have the most of their shit in space. Now, what did Russia do with this news that America apparently won the space race? At this point, Russia was all out of fucks to give, so they just kept on going. In 1970, Russia landed the first spacecraft on Venus, Venera 7. And then just a year later, in 1971, Russia created the first ever space station, Salyut 1, or DOS-1. So now you must be asking yourself, so why did the Americans bend the rules, manipulate the original terms of the space race just so they could declare a win? Now, there are many theories, speculations and conspiracy theories about this question, but a more plausible answer is money. During the space race, Russia's space program spent an estimated 169.8 billion rubles, or $5.6 billion. Whereas in the US of A, bigger is better apparently, the US spent nearly $30 billion on the space race. So if you're now lost, let me streamline everything for you. During the space race, Russia spent less, did more, and didn't cheat. Whereas the US of A cheated, spent more, did less, and declared themselves the winner. Now, knowing all of this, let's ask that original question again. Who won the space race? The USA or Russia? So now we're at the end of the video of my space race TikTok. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. But anyway, my name has been AWRStewart. You have been whoever the hell you are, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye.